morning, everyone, and welcome to First Things First. I'm Jenna Wolfe. This is Nick Wright. That is Cris Canny.
That is Cris Canny.
Hey, man.
What up, man? Good to see you.
We swapped Cris for a Cris. It won't be hard on us, but we thank you so much for joining us today. Chris Carter is calling a game, so
Baltimore,
he can't be here.
Arizona, down in Baltimore, Charm City.
I don't think it's going to be much of a game, but it'll be entertaining to listen to CC's commentary.
Yes, we will discuss that later. You don't see Arizona maybe pulling off the 13-point upset. I see. Okay.
Nah, you don't see it either. Stop.
No, I don't. No.
All right, big Friday show for you this morning. Jason Garrett is betting big on his quarterback, Dak Prescott. The Saints, they're looking for some revenge against the Rams. We got to start with Thursday night football. Cam Newton and the Panthers hosting Jameis Winston and the Tampa Bay Bucks. Pick this up in the third quarter. Panthers down 5. Cam keeps the ball on a read option, gets hit, fumbles. Cam was sacked 3 times, did not score a touchdown for the second straight game. All right, let's move to the final offensive possession of the game for Carolina. They need the touchdown here. 4th and inches. They call a direct snap to Christian McCaffrey, who's stuffed, does not get the first down, and the Panthers do not get the win. Bruce Arians picks up his first win as head coach of the Bucks, while the Panthers drop to 0-2 this season. Here's Cam Newton after another rough outing.
You're not going to hear no type of reasons why tonight didn't go as planned. I have to be better. No matter what physical condition I'm in, no matter what foot, shoulder, I ain't get the job done tonight, man, and it's frustrating. I wish I could say something other than that, but you know that's the facts. And you know I'm an extremely brutally honest person, you know, with people, and I'm extremely brutally honest with myself. And it's time for me to look myself in the mirror and you know do some real soul searching, because I had opportunities tonight and I didn't get it done.
Right now is neither the time nor the place to talk about whatever that get-up was on the podium. So let us focus on that drive that drove you so crazy. You tweeted about it immediately, Nick. What did you make of what the Panthers called and how it was executed?
Listen, obviously Cam was terrible, and we'll talk about that. Cam, at this point, he's either injured or he's finished. I choose to believe it's the former, not the latter. But despite how poorly Cam played, the Panthers had a golden opportunity to steal this football game. A football game they were thoroughly outplayed on both sides of the ball. Aside from their kicker, the entirety of the game, they could have stolen it, gotten to 1-1, steadied themselves, as you have a soft part of their schedule coming up. Not much softer, though, than a home game against Tampa Bay. And the Carolina Panthers, on 4th and inches, they didn't even need a touchdown. They needed a touchdown by the end of the drive, but they had less than a foot to get a first down and give themselves 4 shots from the 1 with plenty of time. They ran that play instead of the single most effective rushing play that exists in the NFL for any quarterback, and that's the quarterback sneak. This is something, The Ringer had a great article on it. It's the only thing that old school football guys and analytics people totally agree on. Sneak it on 4th and short. Sneak it on 3rd and short. And that is with any quarterback. That's with whether you have Eli Manning, whether you have Lamar Jackson, certainly if you have Cameron Newton, the most physically dominating force we've ever seen at the position. And Canny, even though Cam is clearly injured, his foot's not right, I don't know if his shoulder's right, he can still get a yard. And for them to, in that moment, decide to go fake Philly special, roll out with Christian McCaffrey is so nonsensical to me. If people weren't watching the game, it was 4th and 2. There was a pre-snap penalty for an extra timeout on Tampa. It looked to me like Carolina ran the play they were going to run on 4th and 2. Even once it became 4th and less than a foot, it's indefensible by Norv Turner and Ron Rivera. And honestly, Cam should have vetoed it at the end. He's the last line of defense. Said, guys, this is what they said. I'm going to go get this yard. But this is tough to come back from 0-2 when there are 2 home losses, one against the projected worst team in your division. That was an indefensible play call that cost them the game.
Well, let's talk about that, because you said that the Panthers looked like they were going to run the same play on the previous down before Tampa Bay tried to call that second timeout. I mean, they accomplished what Tampa wanted to accomplish in that situation, because they want to get a look at the formation so they can have a game plan going into it. And when the Panthers finally got a chance to run the play, it looked like the Bucs were prepared for it because they had 3 defenders sitting out there waiting for Christian McCaffrey's. Vernon Hargreaves makes the tackle. They get off the field. But in looking at that sequence of plays in that situation in the low red zone, it felt like the best opportunity to score was that 2nd and 10 when they ran the smash concept and Cam Newton's trying to throw the ball to Curtis Samuel in the end zone for a touchdown, but he can't because he's rushed on the throw by Shaq Barrett. For whatever reason, Ron Rivera and Norv Turner refused to give Darrell Williams, their left tackle, any help against Shaq Barrett last night, and he wrecked the game for him.
Yep.
I mean, Shaq Barrett had 3 sacks, a number of quarterback hits. I mean, their offense couldn't get off the ground. I mean, there was one point in the game where they had 9 straight failed 3rd down attempts, and Cam Newton had 7 incompletions in that stretch. So ultimately, you realize that Cam is not being effective in the passing game in critical downs and distances, but that's because the offensive line isn't giving him time to be able to step into his throw and make an accurate throw.
Okay, so there's a lot to get to with Cam Newton here. At this point, I think we can all agree we're probably not going to see 2015 MVP Cam. We keep waiting for it every season. It doesn't seem to happen. We know that he had off-season shoulder surgery. We know that they tweaked his throwing motion a little bit, and he tried to change it. We know what's going on with his foot. He had a foot sprain early in the season. All those things factored in. Is it time to panic with Cam Newton and the Panthers now?
Well, it's for the Panthers this season, falling to 0-2 with this loss, I think panic is deserved. For Cam, as far as longevity, I'm not ready to panic yet. Andrew Luck last year, the first couple games back from missing a season with shoulder surgery, did not look good. In Game 2 last season, I think he had 2 interceptions, a mid-70s quarterback rating, and then by the midway point of October, he looked like old Andrew Luck. But Cam, no matter how often no matter if they change his throwing motion, no matter who the offensive coordinator is, he's never going to be a super precise, dink and dunk, highly accurate passer. It's not going to be what he in his MVP year, he wasn't that. He has to be able to throw the deep ball, and he has to be a threat running the football to open up some of those throws. Right now, he's neither. Right now, he can't throw an accurate deep ball. You're right. Darrell Williams made Shaq Barrett look like Von Miller last night. And
Taylor Mouton wasn't much better.
And he hasn't run all year. I think he has 4 rushing attempts on the season, less than 10 yards rushing. If Cam Newton is not a rushing threat, that has always been an enormous part of his success to go along with whatever's going on with his shoulder, then yeah, you would panic about him. If this is who he is moving forward, then you would panic about him. The hope for Cam is that while he didn't put it on this, that this is about injury more than anything else.
Well, Cam has taken a lot of hits throughout the course of his career. You talked about it since he's come into the league. No quarterback has been hit more, but I think that Norv Turner and Ron Rivera are trying to protect Cam and sometimes not calling those design runs. You're trying to save some hits off of him. The one time that they called the design run in last night's game, he ends up fumbling it on it. Now, they caught a break 2 plays before because it was an interception that was overturned because of a defensive holding call. But ultimately, Norv Turner and Ron Rivera know that if Cam Newton's not healthy, they have no shot at being competitive this season. You saw what it was in the second half of last year when Cam was banged up. So I understand them wanting to get their quarterback to the next game, but I also understand that it can get late early in your season, especially falling to 0-2. You lost 2 conference games at home, 1 in the division. I mean, Nick talked about it before the show in the production meeting. It's a situation where people that were picking the Carolina Panthers to go to the playoffs didn't imagine that the Panthers wouldn't win this early Thursday night game against the Bucs.
Every blueprint, every path to the playoffs involved you win your home game against Tampa. Like, there is no way that you, like me, could pick Carolina to win 10 or 11 games and make the playoffs and you could have them losing to the Rams. You can't have them losing at home to the Bucs. When your defense, by the way, plays quite well, gets a safety, keeps you in the game throughout, and they're going to think about that goal line call all year, because as poorly as Cam played, as poorly as Darrell Williams played, as poorly as the offense was, you are inches away from a first down, 2 yards away from a touchdown, and winning the game, and you try to run some bootleg Philly special. Yeah,
it didn't make sense, but the bottom line is this. The Carolina Panthers had 9 possessions in Tampa territory. They came up with no touchdowns, 0 for in the red zone. That's unacceptable. You're not going to win a lot of football games that way.
When's the part of the show where we get to talk about what was happening?
Listen, man,
the bonnet was about as ugly as the offense last night.
Hold on, so you want him to bring 2 outfits? Because he wore that to the game.
I don't want that to be an outfit for any result of any game.
I'll take
even
Cam
if they
Newton
won by
style up
100.
against. Yeah.
Take a break coming up, and we will talk
set.
much more about this game throughout the morning. But will Drew Brees and the
hating.
Saints get revenge against the Rams Sunday? I am not always hating. I did not love that look. That is next on FS1. You can always check us out on the Fox Sports channel. That's on Sirius XM. We will be right back.
Hey, Cam, if you ever want to critique Jenna's post-show outfits, feel free. You open invite.
Are you ready for what's ahead? You can't always predict the future, but you can game plan for it. Generations of families and businesses have harnessed the power of Pacific to help them reach their unique goals. Whether you need to save money to meet your needs, ensure your family is protected, or make sure you don't run out of money, Pacific Life has a variety of financial solutions that can help. Pacific Life counts more than half of the 100 largest U.S. companies as its clients and has been named one of the 2019 World's Most Ethical Companies by the Ethisphere Institute. Protecting what matters most to people for 150 years and counting, that's the power of Pacific. Ask a financial professional about how Pacific Life can help you game plan for your future, or visit www.pacificlife.com. Back here on First Things First, we'll talk some Saints and Rams in a second. But first, all right, Thursday Night Football highlights Curtis Samuel making the adjustment for a nice 44-yard catch.
It's kind of unbelievable, Kenny, how many chunk plays the Panthers had that none of them resulted in touchdowns.
Yeah. And it looks like Cam Newton underthrew a couple of them, especially to Curtis Samuel. He had a step on the defender. All he had to do was get it out there, push it a little more down the field. Maybe it's a catch-and-run opportunity, but Curtis Samuel has to slow down, lets the defender catch up.
All right, more from this one. Jameis Winston throwing a perfect ball to Mike Evans in stride for 41.
Going into last night's game, Jameis Winston had lost 12 consecutive road games, so it's good to see the quarterback being able to figure out a way to give his team an opportunity to win a game on the road.
Jameis had the one throw that Kuechly almost intercepted, but after throwing the ball to the opposition repeatedly against the Niners, Jameis played really, really well. And it was a critical game for him because people would be questioning his status as the starter if he repeated that performance.
All right, Greg Olsen pulling in the one-handed spinning catch right here.
G-Reg consistently still, year 13, one of the best. But this is another one of the balls you're talking about, Canny, in that, I mean, this is just an easy throw that's missed, that takes a spectacular catch when it shouldn't.
Yeah, a couple of passes sailed on Cam, a few that were behind the receiver, including that one. I mean, Cam was inaccurate the whole night. Now, part of that is the shoulder, but a part of that is because he can't step up in the pocket.
Oh! Here we go. San Diego High School basketball ninth grader Mikey Williams finishes with a nice
Ninth grader? Ninth grader?
Ninth grade.
He kind of remind me of me. That's how I was in ninth grade. Getting a little air out there.
Oh, wow. I mean... Man, tape.
Well, I am 6'8", though, Nick. Come on. If I'm not dunking in ninth grade, there's probably a problem.
Yeah, okay, yeah, but you wouldn't get off the ground. Can't he be lying, man?
If you guys liked last season's NFC Championship game, you will love the 425 game on Fox this weekend. That is a rematch of that one. It's Saints, it's Rams, it's last season's game, which now lives in infamy because of arguably the biggest blown pass interference call in the history of the game. The one that cost the Saints their season, the one that caused a rule change this offseason. Here's what Drew Brees had to say when asked if he's gotten over that blown call.
Still haven't, never will. But when you say forgotten about it, I mean, you know, you have to find a way to compartmentalize it to the point where, you know, you can move on in a positive way. And so I found a way to do that. But as far as just, you know, the events, you know, you live and learn, and you know, sometimes things don't go your way, and you got to find a way to come out better on the other side. We can put together all the storylines we want. I mean, bottom line is they're a really, really good football team. They have the same goals and aspirations we do. You know, we just happen to be the two teams last year that were, you know, kind of at the top and had a chance to play in that NFC Championship game to go to the Super Bowl. You know, unfortunately, that one didn't go our way.
So you would have to imagine just about every man on the Saints is going to use what happened last year as fuel going into this season. You almost want them to. Let it be a little bit of revenge. Do you think that could help them in any way?
Well, sure, to a degree, and I think the Saints will win this game. But real quick, Drew Brees and the Saints got to get over this. Like, enough. And by the way, and I understand you only get so many opportunities, and I understand if you're Drew Brees, the difference given his amazing statistical profile between being a one-time Super Bowl champion and a two-time Super Bowl champion is the difference between being considered one of the 10 to 15 best quarterbacks ever, and people saying, wait, is he top 5? Where is he on the mountain? I get all of that. But that game didn't end on that non-call. The Saints got the ball in overtime, and Drew Brees promptly threw an interception. I don't know how much of that he has gotten over, that they had their opportunity. And there is nothing to say that getting to the Super Bowl is not what they were trying to do last year. Trying to win the Super Bowl. There's nothing to say what Bill Belichick and the Patriots did to the Rams, they wouldn't have done to the Saints. Now, I don't think they would have, but we don't know. But as far as this game, I think the Saints are better than the Rams. I think the Saints, after struggling for a half against Houston, Canny, are going to pick up where they left off in the second half against Houston, which was excellent on both sides of the ball. The Deshaun Watson 2-play touchdown drive notwithstanding, and Drew Brees was great in the second half of that game. So I do think the Saints can go to Los Angeles and beat a team they beat in New Orleans in the regular season last year before losing in the postseason. But I think after this game, please, at the very least, we can leave that NFC Championship game in the past.
You can't leave it in the past. I know it sounds good, but human nature is to lament the opportunities that you didn't take advantage of. I mean, I still remember the times when I lost in playoff games. 2006 with the Dallas Cowboys up in Seattle, Tony Romo fumbles the snap, tries to run it in, gets tackled by Jordan Babineau. 2007, 13-3, number 1 seed in the NFC, hosting the divisional round of the New York Giants. Ended up losing that game. The Giants go on to beat the undefeated Patriots in the Super Bowl. 2014, I'm with the Baltimore Ravens. Got a double-digit lead in Foxborough, and we ended up losing that game.
Let it go,
Those are the ones that you remember. I don't remember the Super Bowl run. I remember those games. But, I mean, in terms of what Drew Brees and the rest of the Saints are feeling, I mean, could you have a more heartbreaking playoff loss than they've had the last two years. Think about the divisional round in Minnesota 2 years ago and then last year in the NFC Championship game. But going back to last year's game, you're right, Nick. They had opportunities in that game coming out of the 2-minute warning. For some reason, Sean Payton calls a pass play rather than running the ball, knowing that the Rams only have 2 timeouts left. I mean, you could run the clock down and kick a field goal, then you kick off and you force the Rams to drive the length of the field to try to get in field goal range. And at worst, they end up kicking a field goal and tying it, and you're going to overtime again.
You got the ball in overtime. Like you had, this was not what happened with Kansas City, where it goes to overtime, you lose the coin flip, and you never see the football. Like, not only did you get the ball, you got the ball, and Drew Brees, as great as he was last year, threw a pick, threw a bad pick. That was, now, we can argue if the pass interference call is made, they go to the Super Bowl, but that's also not a guarantee. They have to make a kick. The Rams would have had probably about 25 seconds, see if they can get their superstar kicker in range. But to spin it forward to this week's game, it should be noted, last year's game did determine the 1 seed.
Yes.
Now, the 1 seed did end up determining who went to the Super Bowl, because obviously the Rams lost, but the Rams lost in the regular season and then went to New Orleans and won. But both these teams last year were 13-3. The reason New Orleans was the 1 seed and the Rams were the 2 seed was this regular season game. I'm not saying history is necessarily going to repeat itself, but when these two teams are only going to play each other once all year because they're not divisional foes, the head-to-head tiebreaker is a critical one. It's not just about who's going to get to 2-0. It's about the end of the year, if they're both 12-4, who gets the 2 seed versus the 3, maybe who gets the 1 versus the 2 again. So the critical nature of this game is enormous, and I need to see from the Rams, can Todd Gurley play a full game? Because in the week 1, he was non-existent in the first half, quite good in the second half.
Really good fourth quarter.
And
they had the lead,
And maybe that's how they're going to use him this year, where he's going to be on a pitch count early in games. To beat a team as good as New Orleans, I think you're going to need a fully functional Todd Gurley for 4 quarters, not just a quarter and a half.
Yeah, completely agree, because New Orleans is one of the more complete teams in the NFC, and so you're going to need Todd Gurley because, I mean, that offense is a different offense when he's out there on the field and he's a threat to get the ball. But in looking at, this matchup in week 2, you asked the question, Jenna, are they going to exact some kind of revenge out in L.A. this weekend? Well, I mean, I don't think they can get any revenge because they can't get to the Super Bowl the following weekend. All they can do is try to position themselves amongst the contending teams in the NFC. And if you could somehow, some way find a way to be one of those top 2 teams in the NFC, well, it's always better to be one of 8 teams competing for a championship rather than 1 of 12. So, I mean, I think that's what New Orleans should have on their mind. That should be the focal point, because I do believe the Rams are a team that's going to be there in December when we're talking about the playoffs. It's just that when you go on the road, you got to focus on the execution. I'm really interested to see how that Saints defense does, because they weren't great in terms of being able to stop the run against Houston. You realize that Sean McVay is going to give them a heavy dose of that out in L.A.
Last year, going into this game, we talked about how these are 2 teams that were fairly evenly matched. They didn't lose a ton of players over the offseason. Which team resembles more the team that we saw last year between these 2?
Oh, I think you're right that they are both very similar. And that the Saints now, they don't have Mark Ingram anymore, and that's a substantial loss. The Rams lost a couple offensive linemen and Ndamukong Suh, and we'll see how substantial those losses are. But the major players from last year and this year are similar. I would say a distinction is in last year's game, the Rams had already lost Cooper Kupp.
Yes.
And now the Saints are going to have to account for that. You mentioned something about the Saints defense. I just want to follow up, because this is obviously where you made your money on the defensive line. How good is the Saints pass rush? Or was what we saw in Week 1, more sacks than any team in the league in Week 1, 11 quarterback hits? To you, was that more about Marcus Davenport and Trey Henry, Cam Jordan, those guys really playing a great game? Or was that more about the Texans' offensive line just being disastrous? Because how duplicable is that going into this Rams game?
No, I think it's more about the Saints' defensive line being really good at being able to get after the quarterback. I mean, the Houston Texans have an improved offensive line, and we saw that based on the production that they had in their ground game.
Sure.
But I think that Saints defense is really good at getting after the passer, and that's exactly what you want when you have a high-powered offense like the Saints do with Drew Brees and company. So if they can somehow dictate the complexion of this game early and put it on Jared Goff's shoulders, force him to drop back and throw it, well, now Sean Payton has the Rams exactly where he wants them. So that's something to watch early in this game.
If they get a half dozen sacks again, they'll win this game going away. They don't even need that level of defensive line pass rush production to put the Rams in a really tough spot.
Saints don't even need refs in this one. All right, take a break. Coming up, will the Steelers pick up their first win of this season on Sunday against Seattle? That's next. This is First Things First.
So many painful memories that just came out, man.
All of them,
yeah,
Danny. All of them.
Man.
Week 1 is in the books, but DraftKings isn't finished celebrating with some huge fantasy football contests. For Week 2 of the football season, DraftKings, the leader in one-day fantasy football, is giving new users a free shot at over $1.5 million in prizes with your first deposit when you put in code FTF during sign-up. Draft your lineup and feel the sweat like never before. Every run, throw, and catch means more with a DraftKings lineup on the line. It's simple. Just draft your lineup, stay under the salary cap, and see how your team stacks up against the competition. Plus, all new and existing users can get a deposit bonus of up to $500. That's some extra cash to play with this football season. Nothing adds to the sweat of watching the game quite like having a shot at over $1.5 million in prizes. Download the DraftKings app now and use code FTF. For a limited time, both new and existing users can get a deposit bonus of up to $500. New users, don't forget to enter our code FTF to get a free shot at over $1.5 million in prizes with your first deposit. That's code FTF. Only at DraftKings. Minimum $5 deposit required. Deposit bonus requires a 25 times playthrough. Eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com for details.
All right, time for us to go viral. So DeAndre Hopkins is preparing for a matchup Sunday with Jags All-Pro corner Jalen Ramsey. Check out this throwback Thursday video that Hop tweeted. Looks like from his high school days in South Carolina. High pointing the ball, making the nasty one-handed catch.
And this is in practice, too. Tell from the jerseys and the helmets. That is, man, this guy has been unbelievable.
All you got to do is just throw it in his general vicinity. He's going to come down with the catch. I mean, arguably the best hands in the National Football League right now. He's unbelievable.
Sometimes we look at these football players and they're like, oh, we're so good. They were great little kids, great in high school, great in college.
At what age did you No, it was really on the board you're going to be a pro athlete.
I was a little different. I wasn't a big-time recruit, so it was once I got to college that I realized I could hang with those guys. But sometimes when you go out to these high school football games, especially when I'm out in Jersey watching high school football, you can tell the kids
That's
that
what I was going to say. Like Diop, it was on the board for Diop by the time he was probably in 8th grade. That there was if things went right, if he had some good breaks, if he didn't get hurt, that he could be exactly where he is.
Yeah.
He's
For
been
Chris Canty,
sensational.
shortly after birth, they were like, that is some baby. Time for stories to start your morning. I don't know what that means either. In my head, it sounded fantastic.
Go ahead. Don't worry about it.
Last night, the Panthers suffered their second loss of the season, falling to the Bucs. Carolina criticized for this play call while trying to pick up the 4th down. All right, Nick, what did you take away from last night's game?
All right, so there's 2 major takeaways. One is on Cam. Cam is either significantly injured in multiple parts of his body, shoulder still healing and foot, or he's cooked. I don't believe he's cooked. I believe he's hurt. The other takeaway is, despite how poorly Cam played, despite how poorly the offense played, if they just sneak the damn ball, we're talking about a 21-20 Carolina theft of a win. That's what we should be talking about this morning. Instead, they run some Fugazi Philly special, and they end up losing a home game to Tampa.
Yeah, sometimes you can get too cute for your own good, and that clearly happened with North Turner with the play calling right there. But the Carolina Panthers offensive line is absolutely awful. We thought it could be bad after that 3rd preseason game up in Foxborough. But, I mean, it is awful. Unless they get that fixed, it's going to be hard for this team, for Cam Newton to get on track.
All right, moving on to Antonio Brown. He's been practicing with the Patriots despite his off-the-field issues. Now, on the field, AB's expected to make his debut with the team on Sunday against, as Chris Carter calls it, the JV Miami Dolphins. Nick, how much do you expect from Antonio on Sunday?
Listen, of course the Patriots are going to play him. I mean, the Patriots, Patrick Chung's still playing. He's waiting on a coke charge. Like, they're not so worried about off-the-field issues as long as you're available. I think Antonio probably 20 snaps, maybe 5 to 7 targets at the most. I don't think you're going to see a super high-level production from Antonio Brown. I do wonder if they use him as a punt returner. Now, they got this new kid that replaced Edelman that's been quite good, but if AB's not going to be getting 15 targets, you could get the ball in his hands as a punt returner. But I think this will be his least productive moment with the Patriots because he just got there.
Yeah, he's going to have a limited package going into this game. It's hard to absorb the full playbook in just 1 week. What I'm interested in seeing is how Bill Belichick is going to use him in their offense. Is he going to be the X? Is he going to be the Z? Is he going to be the slot? Like, what are they planning on getting from Antonio Brown from a production standpoint? They lost Rob Gronkowski, who was a huge part of what they did in the passing game over the middle of the field. Maybe Antonio Brown can help offset that and give them some production in that area.
All right, let's move on to the Jets. Man, it's a tough day yesterday. Sam Darnold has already been ruled out Monday against the Browns. He was diagnosed with mono. The Jets did get a little better news with regards to Le'Veon Bell. The MRI that he had on his sore shoulder did show no tear. He says he's good to go against Cleveland. But, Kenny, is this game as good as over without Sam Darnold?
Well, listen, they're going to start Trevor Siemian. His last start was Week 15 in 2017 against the Colts. He got knocked out of that game, but he didn't look good. He was off to a terrible start. I think he had a 39 passer rating before he exited.
Not great.
So I don't have a whole lot of confidence for the Jets going up against the Browns, especially the way that the Browns are going to come into this game. They're upset about being embarrassed, losing by 30 at home. So it's going to be an uphill climb for the New York Jets. I don't know if they can get it done.
If I told you before the season there was going to be one team in the NFL that in Week 1 blows a 16-point lead to a team whose quarterback has 4 turnovers by himself, and in Week 2 their quarterback is ruled out with mono, would your number 1 pick be the Jets?
Oh, absolutely.
Because my number 1 pick would be the Jets.
It'd be the Jets.
Now, as far as Siemian goes, that final start notwithstanding, I actually think Siemian is a well above average backup quarterback, and I don't think the drop-off between Darnold, where he is right now, and Siemian, where I last saw him, is that significant. I think Darnold obviously enormous, much more potential. But I thought the Browns were going to win this game anyway. Now they are obviously in a far better position to win it. For the Jets, though, this might not just be a 1-week absence for Sam Darnold.
All right, moving on to the Steelers. They host the Seahawks on Sunday on Fox, looking for their first win on the year. That after getting blown out by the Patriots in their season opener. They spent all week telling us they're, quote, foaming at the mouth to get back out there this week. Pittsburgh favored by 3.5 over Seattle, that according to Fox Bet. Here's Mike Tomlin ahead of Sunday's matchup.
We're ready to move forward and prepare for this next opportunity. I just think that's reflective of the journey that is a season in the NFL. At times, you're going to have some negativity, man, and have bad performances potentially. You better not stack them on top of each other. You better transition and move forward. And so this is going to be a big challenge for us in that regard this week as we center our focus and get singly focused on our next challenge, which is Seattle.
All right, Ken, to start with you. You think the Steelers get back on track against the Seahawks?
Yeah, I think they get back on track, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Big Ben Roethlisberger and the Steelers always struggle when they go into Foxborough. I don't think they're going to be the team that we saw on Sunday night going up against the Patriots. I'm not sure what the Steelers are going to be in 2019. But I'm sure that there'll be a version that's better than what we saw. So I think that they'll figure some things out on the offensive side of the ball. They're leaning on Ben to be able to make everybody around him better. They've got to develop those young receivers, try to find who's going to be the number 2 for their number 1 option, which is Juju Smith-Schuster. But in terms of what they're doing on the defensive side of the ball, I'm a little bit more concerned with that. Just because there was a lack of pass rush in that game against the Pats, and they were trying to do some different things coverage-wise on the back end. They tried to implement a little bit more man coverage. That didn't work out. There was some communication breakdown. There wasn't very good safety play. And when you don't have good safety play, it's hard to play good pass defense. So I'm interested to see how Mike Tomlin gets that group back on track and tries to give them a level of confidence because, confidence comes from demonstrated performance. You saw what they did against Tom Brady in the Patriots offense on Sunday night. There's nothing that they can take from that game that would make them feel good about going into this game against Russell Wilson and the Seahawks.
So piggyback off that point before I get to who I think is going to win the game. What Pittsburgh has going for them in this football game defensively is Seattle has just shown over the last year plus that they are going to be dedicated to running the football no matter how ineffective they are running the football. The last 2 games they played, the playoff game in week 1, they've run the ball 50 times for less than 150 yards. That is unacceptable in 2019. It would have been unacceptable in 1979. And they're doing it despite the fact that Russell Wilson's their quarterback. So Seattle's limited wide receivers plus their allergy to throwing the football is maybe just what the Steelers secondary needs because Steelers, the one thing they did well in week 1 was stopping the run. Sony Michel, 14 carries, 15 yards for the Patriots. So the Steelers' run defense was actually up to the task. It was every other part of their team that was not. But do I think they bounce back? No, I do not. Do I think the Steelers are a good team this year? No, I do not. Do I think the Steelers are going to have their first losing season under Mike Tomlin? Yes, I do. Right now, we've got to... I think we've got to, I believe we need to get over the brand and just look at the trajectory. It's a 13-win team that flamed out, unfortunately for them, against the Jags 2 years ago, that then lost their star running back and became a 9-win team, that then lost their star wide receiver and I think now is going to become a 7-win team. This is a team with a quarterback in year 16 who is not getting better, even if you think he's maintaining. The talent around him is getting worse. They have not addressed the defensive issues. Well, they've attempted to address the defensive issues, spent a first-round pick on the star linebacker Devin Bush from Michigan this offseason, and I think he's going to be a really good player. But what do we think the Steelers are going to do great this year? Do we think they're going to have a great running game with James Conner? Well, they haven't since the midway point of last season. Do we think they're going to have an elite passing attack the way they have in years past? Well, that would involve either James Washington or Dante Moncrief or Deontay Johnson, one of those non-Juju Smith-Schuster receivers stepping up. Do we think they're all of a sudden going to have a suffocating defense? They haven't in years. So I don't think they win this game. I think they fall to 0-2. I think Seattle is better than they looked in week 1, and people start questioning how good Pittsburgh actually is.
They don't have a suffocating defense, but they can take advantage of a shaky Seattle offensive line, which we saw. They had a tough line last week, a tough time even though they got the win. So maybe they can make a couple good stops on defense for Pittsburgh, and it can fuel something for them on offense.
Well, Pittsburgh's passing game is looking at this as a get-right opportunity, too, because the Seahawks, they ain't much better on the back end. They allowed Andy Dalton to have a 400-yard passing game, so
John
we'll see what
Ross,
happens.
career day for the track star for Cincinnati against this Seattle defense.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the Dallas Cowboys now. Dak Prescott may not have a new contract just yet. What he does have is the league's attention. That after starting the 2019 season on a very strong note, named the NFC Offensive Player of the Week. Whoa! Dak, just the 5th quarterback in NFL history to open a season with 400 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. And that right there made his head coach very happy.
He's one of the more coachable guys we've ever been around, and he wants to know what you have to say to help him improve, and he listens to it intently and is very purposeful in trying to get it done. And, whether it's footwork, whether it's his throwing motion or decision making or understanding a play or understanding a defense. He's a very conscientious guy. He's a very focused guy. He's very purposeful and deliberate in his approach every day. And I think that's why you see him improve so much in all parts of his game. He loves football. You see it on his face every day. He's an intense competitor. He's an incredibly hard worker. And all of that spirit that he has, that smile on his face and his love for the game is contagious throughout our team. And he embraces every challenge, head on with his shoulders back. And that's one of the things that I think has really helped our team, his leadership and how our guys have responded to it.
Cris Canny, the assumption is Ezekiel Elliott is still not going to have the full workload heading into this game. So do you think Dak Prescott can dominate this week as the Cowboys sort of ease Zeke back in?
Yeah, I think Dak will continue to play well. Now, Jason Garrett's talking about the smile on his face. I'm wondering if that's because his team won the game or because he knows, based on the way he played in Week 1, the price on that contract just keeps going up. But, I mean, in looking at their performance, when you have Zeke out there, even if he's not touching the ball, he's going to dictate front and coverage to the opposing defense, and that's going to create favorable looks in the passing game for Dak and all of those Cowboys receivers. So that's what I'm looking for in Week 2 against the Redskins. I think they're going to continue to be able to do that, utilize the play-action fakes to Zeke, get one-on-one coverage on the outside, find the matchups that favor the Cowboys, and then be able to take advantage of them. And what we saw from Dak in Week 1 and really the latter part of 2018 was his ability to be able to get the ball out of his hands on time with an accurate throw. And so I think that if he can continue to do that, this Cowboys offense is going to continue to roll. Nick, you made the point earlier in the week. You said if Dak Prescott plays like that, the Dallas Cowboys can get to the Super Bowl.
Yes.
Coming into this season, I thought they were one of the handful of teams that had real Super Bowl aspirations. Like, you could actually look at this team and say, this is a championship roster. I think if that continues to on this trajectory, I think the Dallas Cowboys are going to find themselves exactly where they want to be, in the heart of the conversation for trying to compete for a championship.
100%. If Dak continues to play the way he did in Week 1, and by the way, he doesn't have to duplicate what he did in Week 1, just anything close to it. Like what you mentioned, it was one of 4 performances in NFL history. Week 1 was the first time the Cowboys have had multiple receivers with 100 yards receiving in a win since a game involving Michael Irvin. I mean, this is what they did in Week 1 is not duplicable probably at any point this season, but it doesn't have to be for Dak to take major strides forward and major steps towards you believing, okay, maybe he is in the same discussion as Carson Wentz, because that is the question with the Cowboys. I think you look at the Eagles and Cowboys' tail of the tape, it's like, all right, Eagles got better receivers, Cowboys got the better running back, they both have great offensive lines, Cowboys probably better back end, Eagles better front, defensive line.
Yes.
And so you're like, oh, it's pretty even. Except, in my eyes, one team's got a far better quarterback than the other. In Week 1, that wasn't the case. Week 1, Wentz was excellent against Washington. Dak was spectacular against the Giants. And I know the transitive property of sports isn't always, well, this team did this against Washington, so how will this team do this against Washington? But you did just see the team that you're competing with for the division, what Carson Wentz was able to do against that Washington secondary, what that team was able to do once they got their sea legs under them on both sides of the ball against Washington. So I'll be very curious to see how Dallas does going to Washington as nearly a touchdown favorite. See, when I think the whole world knows, Washington included, you shouldn't expect Zeke to get 25 carries.
No.
Their hope, by the way, is that Zeke can be on a pitch count this week and next week against Miami, and that they will have gotten through this stretch with no negative, no downside from the holdout. Like, if they beat Washington, they are going to be facing in a situation where it's like, okay, Zeke missed all the training camp, there was all this drama, and there were no negative effects of it.
Yep.
You know what I mean? That we still got wins, and in fact, the positive was we had to lean on Dak more. But it is, to me, a big ask of Dak Prescott, a guy who consistency has been the question, to put together back-to-back great games. I'm not saying he can't do it, but I am saying for him with me, I still need to see it to believe it. So will he have another 400-yard game? No. I think a 300-yard game would be spectacular. I don't know that I anticipate that either.
Well, part of what last week was the team that they were going up against, and that was the Giants, where Dak just had his way with them. I'm not saying Washington is going to have a much easier time, but I would imagine they're going to look at last week, know that Zeke's going to be sort of used a little bit more, but not completely. What kind of game plan do you think they put together?
Well, Greg Manunsky, the Redskins defensive coordinator, he's going to try to have to stop Ezekiel Elliott. You look at what that Washington Redskins defense did in the second half of that Eagles game without Jonathan Allen. They couldn't stop a nosebleed. They allowed 100 yards rushing. So, I mean, you got to know that Ezekiel Elliott is still a threat to wreck the game for the Redskins. But, I mean, in looking at what Dak Prescott was able to do against the Giants, I mean, on third downs, Dak was spectacular. He was 5 of 7 for 122 yards and a touchdown, and then he actually converted one, being able to use his legs. So, I mean, of the 6 conversions that the Cowboys had on third down, Dak was responsible for all of them. So if he can continue to sustain drives and keep that offense on the field, I think it makes everybody on that team better, not just the guys on the offensive side of the ball, but the guys on the defensive side of the ball. And we know that that's an undersized group. But when the Cowboys win time of possession, they usually win the game. So, I mean, that's the thing about what Dak is doing for them right now. If you can take a little bit of the burden off Ezekiel Elliott, put them in a position where they don't have to wear him out early in the season, I think that that's a win for the Cowboys. Jerry Jones doesn't want to see what happened to the Rams at the end of last year happen to his team, because the Rams had a shell of Todd Gurley when they got to the playoffs. The Cowboys can't afford that. Zeke is the best player on their team. They got to get him to the playoffs healthy so he can be that impact player.
Sounds like Canny's got Cowboys in a blowout.
Saint.
Yeah,
Coming up, will the Saints get revenge against the Rams on Sunday? That's ahead. This is First Things First. Back here on First Things First with former Eagles All-Pro running back Brian Westbrook. Hey, Brian.
What up, man? Good to see
morning.
you, sir.
It's Friday.
Nice
We're
to
getting
see
a
you.
day closer to some Sunday football.
Yes, exactly.
Got the fresh jacket on. Crispy.
It looks
Trying to be like you when I grow up.
Look at that line. That's the razor edge
You get
right
your
there.
haircut 3 times a week. Don't lie.
Twice a week.
Twice a week.
I want to look. I'm trying to look at your hair.
Every day,
Your hair is
man.
perfect every time I turn the TV
looks
on.
painted on. It looks
Crispy.
great. You ain't
4
lying.
people on the set, 3 of them, the guys, talking about hair.
Oh, yeah,
This
man.
is interesting.
Game recognized game.
Locker room
Eagles
talk.
will be in Atlanta to face the Falcons Sunday. So according to Fox Bet, Philly's a 2-point road favorite. Perhaps it's because the Falcons were clobbered last week in their season opener. Or perhaps it's because the Eagles are good. Despite what happened to Atlanta last week, Eagles head coach Doug Peterson is not taking them lightly.
I mean, it's a solid defense. When you look at them, you know, that's why you can't go off of last week, because we know this defense. I mean, it's another good test for us offensively. It comes down to execution, how well we prepare this week. But this is a playoff caliber team with a playoff caliber defense.
All right, believe it or not, I mean, you make your choice there. How do you think the Eagles' offense matches up against this Falcons defense?
Well, first of all, I love coach talk, and it's always these guys are great, and they just the Falcons just got ran through last week. And so when I look at this, I think the Falcons defense is in a bit of a tough spot. Last week, they get ran for 172 yards. Dalvin Cook, the whole Vikings offense, ran through that defense of the Falcons, trying to get to the edge, things like that. But now you put on the tape of the Philadelphia Eagles, and you see Deshaun Jackson, Nelson Aguilar, Zach Ertz running down the middle of the field. And so what do you stop? Do you pick your poison to say, okay, we're going to stop the deep pass and give up some run gains? Or do you say, we're going to stop the run, which we didn't do last week, and we're going to give it the big passes down the middle? And so to me, the one thing I don't want to happen is I don't want the run game to beat me and Carson Wentz to beat me. So they have to figure out what they want to do. Do you want to stop the run or the pass? Last week, they couldn't stop the run. The Falcons defense couldn't. Now they run against an offense that has the ability to throw the ball down the field with Carson Wentz and run the ball with Miles Sanders as well as Jordan Howard. They have to pick the poison. They're in a bad position defensively this week.
Well, here's the thing with the Falcons defense, right? This is an undersized group. They're really built to play with the lead. Where they ran into trouble last week in Minnesota was that the offense didn't do anything with the football for the first 3 quarters of that game. And that defense wore down. And that's why the Vikings were able to have so much success with Dalvin Cook and others with the rushing attack, because you got that big physical offensive line leaning on that undersized Atlanta Falcons defensive front. So I think it's imperative that Matt Ryan and that Falcons offense gets out to a fast start. And you're probably looking at them being able to take advantage of the passing game and the deficiencies that the Eagles have on the back end of that defense. We talk about it, the Eagles being one of the most talented rosters in the NFL top to bottom. Well, the area that they can be got is in the secondary with those defensive backs, mainly their corners. When you look at it, Avonte Maddox, Ron Darby, Sidney Jones, those are the guys that you want to go after. When you paid Julio Jones $20 million plus a year and you've got Calvin Ridley, another first-round draft pick, those are the guys, those are the matchups that you want to try to take advantage of. So for me, it's about Matt Ryan being able to get this offense back on track. Until that happens, this entire team is going to struggle because they're built to play football a certain way.
I wholeheartedly agree with you, Kenny. You laid it out yesterday. Atlanta's first 8 drives, it was like block punt, interception, 3 and out, fumble, 3 and out. It was they got nothing going until it was 28-0. The game was over. And Atlanta, I know they have a defensive-minded head coach. I don't know if he's actually good at that part of football. I know that that's what since he got the job being the D coordinator with Seattle, when back-to-back years they had the best defense in football by far, in Atlanta, that has not transitioned over. Maybe it's personnel. Maybe that's unfair to Dan Quinn. I just know since he's been there, none of us has looked at the Falcons and been like, man, that's a great defense. Mm-hmm. I don't think there have been many years we've even looked at them and said, that's a pretty good defense. So for Atlanta to have any chance, yes, they're going to have to get off to a quick start offensively, which I think will address some of your concerns for them on the other end. If they get out to a lead, then you can play the pass more heavy and not worry about Philly running all over you. Because if I'm Philadelphia, even if I hadn't seen week 1, I'd go into this game saying our offensive line against their defensive line, let's see if the big back we got from Chicago, Jordan Howard, can be the guy he was as a rookie. Let's see if we can run the ball repeatedly down their throats early, and that's even more compounded when you saw what an offensive line in Minnesota that's not very good. Mm-hmm. That's the weakness of their team, what they were able to do to this Falcons defense. But if you do focus on that as Atlanta, then D-Jack can hit you over the head. Yep. That's why I think you said it, and I think you're not the only one. Of all the offseason moves, aside from maybe Nick Foles going to Jacksonville, the one that could have the most impact on winning games was the Deshaun Jackson addition, because while Philadelphia already had such a well-rounded team, the one thing they were missing was the thing Deshaun has done better than almost anyone in NFL history. One play, huge strike, touchdown, and you saw that on full display in week 1. So it is an element of, this is why Philadelphia is Jenna's Super Bowl pick. There's an element of pick your poison. How do you want to get beat? And so for Atlanta, the only chance they have, and by the way, a game that's, what, a 2-point spread? Like, it's not like they're supposed to be blown out in this. They're at home. They're supposed to be a good team. The only chance they have is to make this a track meet, to make Philadelphia keep up with them offensively.
When I look at the last 3 games between the Falcons and the Eagles are 3-0. All of those games were in Philadelphia. You got to think about this. In those 3 games, Atlanta only scored 38 combined points, 9 sacks, 32 quarterback hits. That means they weren't able to protect Matt Ryan. Philadelphia was able to get after him, even with Julio. I think there was a couple passes where Julio absolutely lost the game for him because he didn't catch those balls. I think Philadelphia, Jim Schwartz's defense has found the answer to Matt Ryan. That means they're pressuring him off the edge, making him quicken up his reads, not allowing Julio to be able to get down the field and dominate the game that way. That has been helpful for Jim Schwartz and that defense. I think defensively, they continue that same model. Mm-hmm. Allow Fletcher Cox to get in to be a physical man up front. You bring in Malik Jackson with the injury. Now you have to figure out how do you get pressure off the edge. That's what the Philadelphia defense is all about. We're not going to blitz. Last week they blitzed, they got beat over top. I think this week they go four guys rushing, and they try to get out to Matt Ryan that way.
Well, you talked about the last several games that they played. I think that's enough of a sample size for Dan Quinn to know that this Philadelphia Eagles team is more physical than your team. Mm-hmm. That's the reality of it. Bill Parcells used to say this all the time. The worst thing that you can do in this business is fool yourself. And so Dan Quinn has got to know who his team is and who they ain't. And the reality is, I think that the matchup that you can take advantage of is that Philadelphia Eagles pass defense. Since the start of 2018, they're the second worst pass defense in the NFL. And it's just the same span, the Atlanta Falcons passing attack is the 4th best in the NFL. So that's your matchup that you need to take advantage of.
Right.
Like Nick said, turn it into a track meet. That's the only shot that they got because the Eagles on both sides of the ball at the line of scrimmage are a better football team.
But just quickly, when do we start having a Matt Ryan conversation? I mean, how much of...
Oh, I don't... years from now,
Okay.
I think. I mean, I think Matt Ryan, he won the MVP a few years ago.
A few years ago
Well,
now.
hold on. So
But
he
we
won the
keep going back
MVP
to
in
that.
2016. 2017, he had a bit of a down year. Last year, his numbers were almost identical to the MVP season. Last year was about injury, terrible defense, and some heartbreaking losses early. Listen, I don't think Matt Ryan is some no-doubt Hall of Fame quarterback, but Matt Ryan, you can't... It's hard to make a list of 10 quarterbacks you'd rather have. You disagree?
Well, I think Matt Ryan has a bunch of talent around him. That's what every quarterback wants. When you have that talent, you have to win. He hasn't won consistently enough. I think that's the biggest thing that I would say about Matt Ryan.
Welcome to my team. It'll be short-lived, I'm sure. Stick around, Brian. Coming up, is it time for the Saints to get over their loss in the NFC Championship? That is next on First Things First. Back with Brian Westbrook. We're going viral. Oh, I can't. Cam Newton and the Panthers couldn't get it done on Thursday Night Football, but Cam still had it going on pregame with the snakeskin suit. I'm okay with that. It's the scarf that I have a bit of an issue with.
Anyone can wear anything they want to this game, given what Michael Irvin was wearing calling the game. Come on.
Wow.
Playmaker was on
going after
I love him.
Irv.
Come on,
man.
I'm allowed to. I love it.
Yeah, you didn't love that shirt.
No, come on.
Irv has some crazy suits now.
Yeah.
But wait, you lose a game the way you lost. People are talking about how if you've fallen off, if you're injured, what, and you're sitting there in your locker room going, let me just make sure I get the.
Yeah, you can walk into the stadium like that, but after you lose again, you need to be in issue apparel, a sweatsuit with a hat on.
Take that off.
Y'all are ridiculous.
What?
Cam looked...
No, that was ridiculous.
No, make a defense for that.
Going into the game, you want to look fresh, you want to feel good, you want to look good. I think you guys have a point with the post game. Listen, all I want to see is a hoodie and a frown. That's it.
Let's scale this thing back a little bit.
Cam said everything right in the postgame, right? He put it all on himself.
But who could hear it?
Sometimes what you're wearing speaks louder than what he's saying.
You couldn't hear anything with that scarf. A scarf, Nick.
Jenna Wolfe giving these fashion tips.
I'm with you.
Is
I'm
the
with you,
funniest
Jenna.
thing.
Listen,
I
have two outfits: show outfit and workout outfit. That's it.
Yeah. And you're out here criticizing
No way
this
I'm wearing
fashion
a scarf.
icon.
All right, moving on.
Fashion icon.
If you liked last season's NFC Championship game, you will love the 425 game on Fox this weekend because it's a rematch of that one. Saints and Rams. Last season's game now lives in infamy because of, arguably, the biggest blown pass interference call in the history of the game. The one that some say cost the Saints their season. The one that caused a rule change this offseason. Here's what Saints quarterback Drew Brees had to say when asked if he's gotten over the blown call.
Still haven't, never will. But when you say forgotten about, I mean, you have to find a way to compartmentalize it to the point where you can move on in a positive way, and so I found a way to do that. But as far as just the events, you live and learn, and sometimes things don't go your way, and you got to find a way to come out better on the other side. We can put together all the storylines we want. I mean, bottom line is, they're a really, really good football team. They have the same goals and aspirations we do. We just happen to be the two teams last year that were, kind of at the top and had a chance to play in that NFC Championship game to go to the Super Bowl. Unfortunately, that one didn't go our way.
All right, Brian, we talked about this a little earlier, and Chris Kinney, like this, had a running list of all the things that perhaps didn't quite go his way. He remembers them in detail. As a player, are you like Drew Brees? Are you sort of keeping a running tab on all the ways you guys have lost, or tough losses over the years?
I think all players do that. And I think back to my rookie year, we lost to Tampa Bay at home, NFC Championship game. Rondé's running down the field. The entire crowd in the link is silent as Rondé's running down the field for a touchdown. I think think back to the Carolina game we lost, the NFC Championship game, the Super Bowl we lost.
Yes.
All of those terrible memories. And so I think as a player, you use that as a chip on your shoulder. A couple years ago, the Eagles were the underdog. That was the dog mask. You use those types of things to motivate you just a bit. In the offseason, that's what you need. You need that type of motivation to get up and go work out every single day. And so now you move forward. Now they have the opportunity to avenge that. Now they have the opportunity to go out into their house and win the game there the same way that the Saints lost their game at home against the Rams last year. To me, it comes down to a couple of different things. Can you get a run game? Can you get Alvin Kamara involved in a run game? Obviously, no Mark Ingram. Can you slow down the Rams offense that way? Can you do that? The other part is, the last is Marcus Peters and Talib played against Mike Thomas. Mike Thomas
ate him up.
Well, Mike Thomas in week 9 ate him up. 211 yards. In the NFC Championship game, 7 targets, only 4 catches, 36 yards. And so can you get him going? That's how your offense gets going. Also, last thing, can you protect Drew Brees? Can you make sure that he's not in position that Aaron Donald is affecting this game the entire game, especially hands in his face, right in the pressure in his face? Can you do that? If you can do those things, I think the Rams are in a bad way. But I think that, listen, Drew Brees is a special quarterback. We understand that. I think the Rams have the ability. That offense with Kupp and Cooks as well as Woods, they have the ability to put up a lot of points, especially at home. I'm worried about the Saints' defense, especially the secondary, because I didn't think Lattimore was that good last week.
Well, so you mentioned Aaron Donald, and so something interesting from the playoff run through week 1's 4 games, 0 sacks, 10 total quarterback pressures. That is after over the previous 2 regular seasons, averaging over a sack a game and nearly 7 quarterback pressures a game. So one could argue, and I think it's probably the right argument, it's that in the playoffs, teams were like, Aaron Donald is not going to ruin us. The Houston, in week 1, for the Rams, the Carolina Panthers said Aaron Donald is not going to, I don't think he's fallen off as a player, but he has been neutralized in his last four football games. So that is one thing to watch. For the Saints, I understand that there's an element of devastating loss that the two of you any guy that actually played can remember and pull on that I cannot, having not played. I get that part of it. I do wonder if it stops being constructive, however, once the offseason ends and you're into the next season. If it stops being something where it's one thing for it to be fuel for you to get better. It's another thing for you to be thinking about what ifs when you're in the midst of your next opportunity, which the only thing you can control is what's next, not what went in the past. And we saw the Saints had a wonderful ability to get over what I would consider an equally devastating loss the previous season with the Minneapolis Miracle. Now, that one was different in that was an error by one of their players instead of an error by the official. But there was an error by one of their players in that NFC Championship game lost too. They won the coin toss, and Drew Brees threw a pick. Or else they could have gone to the Super Bowl. I think the Saints are better than the Rams. I think the Saints, they took a half to get going against the Texans, but in the second half, Drew Brees, 80% completions, 143 rating. The defense played really well, that one Deshaun Watson drive notwithstanding. So I think the Saints should win this game. I don't think it'll be very much, though, because of how they lost the last time these two teams played.
Yeah, exactly. What happened last season is not going to have any bearing on what happens in this actual game. Now, if the players want to use what happened last year as motivation, as something to make them be more dialed in throughout the course of the week in their preparation, then I think it can be a positive. But once the ball is kicked off on Sunday at, 4:25 Eastern, once that happens, you have to focus on trying to slow down that Rams offense and dictate the complexion of the game. I believe this will be a fourth quarter game because both of these teams are good. And so if it gets to the fourth quarter and it's close, you would probably give the edge to Sean Payton and Drew Brees. But in seeing how the NFC Championship game played out, those guys were in a fourth quarter game and they ended up being on the losing side of it. So I think they have to learn the lessons from the end of that game and manage it a little bit better. The play calling and the sequencing of plays has to be better. I thought it was inexcusable what Sean Payton did after the 2-minute warning in the fourth quarter of that NFC Championship game, calling a pass early in the downs to Michael Thomas. It was an incompletion. It stopped the clock for the Rams. They only had 2 timeouts left. You could have ran the ball 3 times, kicked the field goal, and then kick off with very little time left on the clock and force the Rams to drive the length of the field to try to get in field goal range. Instead, you end up losing that game. Now, it went to overtime, but you still ended up losing that game. I thought he could have did a better job of giving his team an opportunity to close that one out. But, I mean, in looking at these two teams, what it comes down to is, Are the Saints going to be able to slow down that Rams offense? Are they going to be able to put the game on Jared Goff's shoulders and take it out of Todd Gurley and Malcolm Brown's hands? To me, if they're able to do that, if that defense is able to be better against the run, then I think that the Saints have a really good chance to go on the road and get a huge win in the NFC.
I think it's kind of funny that we haven't mentioned until your last sentence anything about Todd Gurley and his ability to control the football game. Only 14 rushes last week. I still think they're trying to save him just a bit. But I think Todd Gurley, this is a huge game for him.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, you look at week 1 against Carolina. They didn't use him a lot the first 3 quarters, but in the fourth quarter, 8 carries for 64 yards. He was able to close the game for him.
Yeah, if you want to keep the ball out of Drew Brees' hands, you run the football a little bit more. Todd Gurley is going to be huge in this game. He had no impact in that NFC Championship game. This is a bounce-back week from him. You're talking about guys that are circling games. To me, if I'm Todd Gurley, I'm circling all of these games where I had no impact in the latter point of last season. This is a great opportunity for him against a defense that I think you can have some success running the football against.
All right, we've got to take a break. Brian, we'll see you later in the show. Coming up, would you rather have Kyler Murray or Lamar Jackson? That's next on First Things First. All right, we'll get to Kyler and Lamar in just a second, but first, a little Thursday Night Football. Curtis Samuel making the adjustment for a 44-yard catch.
If Cam puts that a little further out there, they're talking about putting up 6 and not putting up 3. That was a missed opportunity right there in the passing game. We talked all offseason about Cam and his new throwing motion. Came up just a little bit short last night. He was inaccurate on a lot of throws. You saw some passes sail, some underthrown, some thrown behind the receiver. That's an opportunity in the passing game that you just can't miss.
More from this one. Jameis Winston, a perfect ball to Mike Evans in stride for 41 yards.
A really impressive bounce-back game from Jameis. I know they didn't put up a ton of points. They obviously put up enough to win. But Jameis, after having as poor of a game as you possibly can have in week 1, bouncing back against what I think is a good Carolina defense, even though the secondary didn't look it a lot of last night. Chris Godwin running open Mike Evans with that play.
Here we go. Greg Olsen pulling in the one-handed spinning catch. Again, probably not a great throw. A great catch, though.
Great catch by Greg Olsen. I don't know how he continues to do it at a high level, being in the NFL as long as he has. But, I mean, he's clearly the safety blanket for Cam Newton. They tried to target him a lot, especially early on in that second half. Just not enough for the Carolina Panthers offense, but Greg Olsen had a good game.
11th career 100-yard game for Greg Olsen last night, and that's just another one of those inaccurate passes from Cam. Oh, my God.
Finally, San Diego High School basketball star, 9th grader Mikey Williams finishing the nice windmill dunk.
All right, Chris Canty out here claiming that this is what he was looking like in 9th grade. A video where it didn't happen, Canty. Your big self windmilling, I believe you can dunk because you're 7'2", but the idea that you were windmilling on anything past the Lil Tykes hoop, I don't believe you.
Whoa. Chill out. Just because you're not athletic, don't try to put that on me. Listen, we have evidence that I was a baller in high school. There is evidence out there. I have to bring in the tape, but we got evidence.
I bet you I can produce a video of me dunking before you produce one of you dunking.
Wow. Okay. You're right.
Oh, no. Okay. By the end of the show. Go ahead, Jenna.
All right, here we go. Speaking of ballers, Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, the 2 former Heisman winners, will be facing off at 1 Eastern on Fox. Our guy Chris Carter will be on the call. Earlier this week on our show here, Lamar was complimentary of Kyler. Now Kyler's head coach, Cliff Kingsbury, had some very positive things to say about both of the young quarterbacks. Said, in my opinion, they're 2 guys that can be the future of the sport if they continue to progress and put in the work and the time. They have all the tools. They have the competitive nature. Their entire lives, all they've ever done is win and been on the best player on the field. That's the way it can go if they're willing to put in the work. Nick, who would you rather have moving forward, Kyler or Lamar?
I think I'm in the drastic minority here because Lamar was a player that almost fell out of the first round entirely, final pick of the first round. Kyler was the #1 overall pick of the draft. But for me, this is an easy answer, and the answer is Lamar Jackson. I think Lamar Jackson has the potential to be a high-level, multi-year NFL starter. I'm not sure if Kyler Murray is going to have a multi-year career as a starter. Now, he'll be in the league for a long time, but I need to see it before I can believe it with Kyler, and that would be with any quarterback his size, because we've never seen it done. And it has nothing to do with week one. I don't care how you play your first game as a rookie, new offense, rookie head coach. I know how great he was in college football, but we have seen plenty of guys around his size be great in college football and not even get a chance to play in the NFL at that position, much less steward a franchise, trade their previous number one draft pick for this number one draft pick. I think Lamar is showing the progression of a guy who can be a dynamic weapon in this league. He already is one of, I would say, the two fastest players to ever play quarterback. He and Michael Vick are the two fastest guys we've seen as essential year one starters. And what he showed last year in limited throws, Warren Sharp talks about this a lot, that his efficiency numbers compared to non-running quarterbacks as rookies compare favorably. And what he showed you in week one, I know it's against Miami, and I know Miami was bad, but if you actually watch the game, it's not like those receivers were all running wide open. Those were dimes. Those were great passes. Those passes to Hollywood Brown, he had no offseason with Hollywood Brown. Hollywood Brown was injured in the offseason, injured in preseason, and he had an instant rapport. So right now, I am buying even more stock in Lamar. I don't have any to sell in Kyler because I never bought it in Kyler. I hope I'm wrong, by the way, because he seems like a great young man, and I'd love to see that style of quarterback get to the NFL and that size issue not be a size issue. But we were talking off the air, Canny, a minute ago, you and Brian Westbrook saying how he'd look across the line of scrimmage, see your 6'8" self with his intimidating face mask, say, what, are you kidding me? This is a league where big people matter. And Kyler's the smallest we've ever seen trying to do it. So for me, the answer is clearly Lamar.
No, I mean, you didn't tell a lie in that statement. But the one thing I will say, with the changes in the rules and the evolution of today's game and having more influence from the college ranks infiltrate the NFL, I think if you're going to have a quarterback that's under 6 feet, this presents the best opportunity for him to have success. But in looking at the two guys, I think it's way too early to judge which one will be the better quarterback. We just don't have a large enough sample size. Lamar Jackson, what does he have? 9 starts?
9 career starts.
And then Kyler Murray is coming off of his first career start. Now, I mean, both of them have shown flashes. And, I mean, Lamar Jackson looked really good last week. He looked really good in the second half of the 2018 season where he guided his team to a 6-1 record in the regular season. Now, it was ugly in the playoff game. The Chargers threw some wrinkles at him he wasn't prepared for. But I just think it's way too early to judge both players. But the one thing I will say is this. If you look at the two organizations, you'd probably say that Lamar Jackson has a better chance of realizing his full potential than Kyler Murray with the Arizona Cardinals. Earlier this week, Colin said it on The Herd. He said that players don't necessarily win championships. It's organizations that win championships. Now, while I don't fully agree with that statement, there is an element of truth to it because you do have to have the structure in place so that guys can go about the business of preparation and actually improving as an individual player. So I think that Lamar Jackson has it all out there in front of him. You trust the stability of the organization, the coaching staff with John Harbaugh and them building a system around him. You know, we don't know what Cliff Kingsbury is going to be as a head coach. Right. We don't know what this offense is going to be at the NFL level. So I still think there are some serious question marks in the desert. There are some serious hurdles for Kyler Murray to clear that Lamar Jackson is not going to have to deal with.
No, it's such a good point. He's got a better structure around him. He's got a better protection. He's obviously got an incredible defense to really help them out. You've got a proven coach that's been there. It's a winning organization compared, obviously, to what he's got in Arizona. And also for Lamar, what a great way to start the season if you're looking to build some confidence against Miami and Arizona, probably two of the least talented rosters in the league. That's got to sort of give Lamar a little confidence as he's getting ready to dive
for
into
sure.
the season.
I would also argue for Kyler's confidence coming back the way they did in your first NFL game, to be dead in the water for 3 quarters, to be down 18 points going into the fourth quarter, or not going into, but early in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
But that after a very shaky first. Right,
but I actually think that almost I almost think that works in his benefit, that he could play that poorly and the offense could be that poorly early and they come back. Now, your point on organizational structure, totally agree. Your point on the Ravens can beat you 13-10 because of their defense. The Cardinals are not going to be able to do that. They don't have the personnel to do that. I totally agree. The point I'm making is if both these teams contracted and they didn't exist, and if I were just roster unseen, asked, which quarterback do I want? They're both available to me, Lamar or Kyler. I would rather have Lamar. I think you can build a team around him more easily. Now, I think that is the drastic minority opinion. Yeah. Draft status shows that the Arizona Cardinals would not have traded the #1 overall pick for Lamar Jackson. I understand that. I just think over the course of their careers, Lamar has a much better chance at being a high-level player, while I think Kyler's got some work to do to prove that at his size, he can even be an everyday NFL starter.
All right, let's take a break. Coming up, can Aaron Rodgers get the Packers' offense rolling against the Vikings? It is a big divisional matchup there in the NFC North. Next on First Things First.
Might be the second best game of the week.
Welcome back to First Things First. It is time to talk Super 6 NFL Sunday, the new free-to-play game where you can win up to $250,000 of Terry Bradshaw's money. All right, Nick, one of the matchups in this week's Super 6 NFL Sunday is the Cowboys versus Washington. Who wins and by how many points?
Dallas Cowboys pull it off. However, I do not think they cover. In fact, I think they win by 4. So I like Dallas to get to 2-0, Washington to fall to a hard-fought 0-2. Dallas by 4 is my pick. Cris Canny?
Yeah, it's usually close between these two teams, but I got the Cowboys by 10, and it's just because I think the Cowboys are a different team than they have been in past years. So I just like what I've seen from Dak Prescott, and having Ezekiel Elliott in the fold, I know what that offense is capable of doing. I don't trust that Redskins defense.
All right, Cris Canny is here. Chris Carter is not, but he is taking the Cowboys by a whopping 15 points. 15 points. All right, before the games kick off this Sunday, download the Fox Sports Super 6 app and play Super 6 NFL Sunday for free for a chance to win $250,000 of Terry Bradshaw's money. All right, guys, the other Chris is taking the, well, basically.
He's taking the day off, but not really. He's in Baltimore. No, he's in Baltimore because I guess he's working this Sunday, doing an important job, calling Ravens Cardinals this weekend.
Big divisional rivalry coming up between the Packers, Vikings this week, both coming off wins in week 1. Aaron Rodgers, though, looking to get his offense back on track after what happened last week.
And we'll get to that in a second. Real quick on last night's game. Sorry to interrupt you, Jenna. Canny, I don't know how the Panthers do this. Yeah. I don't know how the Panthers don't sneak it right there to win the game, a game they had no business winning whatsoever, but they could have if they just run a sneak there.
Yeah, that's criminal right there. Listen, I understand that Christian McCaffrey is your second best player, but he hadn't had a lot of success running the football all night. Todd Bowles had that Bucs defense dialed in. That group is not getting enough credit. Kevin Minter, the backup linebacker, he stepped in after Devin White went out with the injury in the first quarter. But those guys played really good football, top to bottom on that defensive side of the ball for the Bucs.
All right, let's move on to Antonio Brown now. Antonio Brown has been practicing with the Patriots despite his off-the-field issues. He changed from a number 1 to a number 17 there in practice. And on the field, AB expected to make his debut with the team on Sunday when the Patriots face the Miami Dolphins. Nick, how much do you expect from Antonio on Sunday?
Not much. I think he'll be active. I think he'll play. I think we'll see Antonio, but I think Antonio's going to have 5 to 7 targets. And because it's his first game with the Patriots, if that is the case, I think he'll be fine with it. I am curious when he's got $1.5 million if he gets 1,300 yards, $1.5 million if he gets 16 touchdowns, $1.5 million if he gets over 105 catches, I think it is. How okay he's going to be moving forward when he has 5 targets, 4 catches, even if it's a good game that the Patriots win. But I don't think they're going to need him much in this game, and I don't think they're going to use him that much in his first game with the team.
Well, I think it's a great opportunity to get him integrated in the offense. Of course, it's going to be a limited package. There's only so much you can learn in a week's time. But I'm interested to see how Bill Belichick deploys him, whether he plays the X, the Z, or the slot. AB has got experience in doing all of that in Pittsburgh, but this is a completely new offense. It'd be interesting to see how they utilize him.
I'm sure he'll handle every situation just great. On to the Jets now. Some bad news. Sam Darnold has already been ruled out Monday against the Browns, diagnosed with mono. However, Jets did get some better news with regards to running back Lev Bell. The MRI that Le'Veon Bell had on his sore shoulder showed no tear. Bell says he's good to go against Cleveland. But, Kenny, you think this game is as good as over without Sam Darnold in the lineup?
Well, I think it's going to be tough for the Jets. I mean, they're down QB1, but also when you look at the defensive side of the ball, the health of C.J. Mosley is very very much so up in the air.
He was great.
And he was
1.
great. And you saw how that defense collapsed in the fourth quarter against the Bills when he went out. And then, of course, Quinnen Williams, their top draft pick, he's also dealing with an ankle injury. So you don't have your starting quarterback, and you have your defensive side of the ball being compromised, including your signal caller. It's going to be tough for the Jets on Monday night.
Week 1, the Jets play Josh Allen, a tight end playing quarterback. He turns the ball over 4 times. They have a 16-point lead, and they lose. Week 2, 4 days before the game, their quarterback is ruled out with something I didn't think you could get once you got out of college. What? And so, I mean, this is, as one would say, that's so Jets. I know some people had them going 9-7. Oh, this is the year they get the wild. No, it's not. And by the way, I mean, Trevor Siemian, I think, is a good backup, but the Browns are going to win this weekend.
All right, now let's talk some Packers here. Big divisional rivalry between them and the Minnesota Vikings, both coming off wins in Week 1. Aaron Rodgers, though, looking to rebound after scoring just 10 points in that season opener under new head coach Matt LaFleur. Chris Canty, I'll ask you expect the Packers and that new offense to click this week, taking on a team like Minnesota?
Well, it's still going to be a learning curve, and it becomes a whole lot harder when you have a defense like the Vikings, especially the Vikings front four, because they can get after it as much as any front four can in football. So when you look at Everson Griffin and Danny Hunter, those guys, they're going to be applying a lot of pressure on Aaron Rodgers, and that was one of the things that we saw be a factor in that season opening game for the Packers going up against the Bears defense. With all of that being said, Aaron Rodgers owns the Minnesota Vikings. He's got 7 games where he has a passer rating north of 130. So, I mean, I look at this situation, even though it's a new offense, you have a new play caller with Matt LaFleur. I just think that Aaron Rodgers, that offense is going to look a lot better in Week 2 than it did in Week 1. Keep in mind that Aaron Rodgers didn't take any snaps in that offense in the preseason.
Yep, that was important.
That was the first time that they went out there and actually had to execute against somebody else in a different color jersey. So when you look at it, of course, it's going to be a little bit of a struggle just trying to get into a rhythm, get a feel for what Matt LaFleur wants to do and how he calls a game. But, I mean, Aaron Rodgers is one of the most talented quarterbacks in football. I think they'll figure that out. And the good thing about this Packers team this year is they finally have a defense that can actually hold other teams' offenses down and keep them in a game until the offense figures it out.
There's the golden part of the Packers season. 5 of the next 6 at home. They just won what I think was the single most important game on their schedule. And by that, I mean the road game against the team favored to win your division. If you all wins are not created equal, that's the one you need more than anything. Just like if you're the Panthers, losing a home game to the team that's favored to finish last in your division is pretty bad. The reason I picked the Packers to go to the Super Bowl is because of the opportunity to start off 2-0 against the 2 teams in their division that matter other than them, and then get off to a 6-1 start given this schedule, given this home slate. Get feeling good before you hit the meat of their season. Now, the Vikings defense in Week 1 looked a hell of a lot like the Vikings defense in 2017. A Vikings defense that was so good with Case Keenum at quarterback, and Case played well that year. They got to the NFC Championship game and had a lead in the NFC Championship game before the Avalanche hit them in Philly. Also, I don't know if people saw David Bakhtiari, limited in practice on Wednesday, missed practice on Thursday. I think he's the best left tackle in football. If he's out, you either bring Brian Bulaga over and then your right side's compromised, or you have a backup player playing left tackle against, as you mentioned, a dominant defensive front in Minnesota. So I think points could be hard to come by again for the Green Bay Packers in this game. Not 10 points, but I don't think they're going to win this game 35-31. I think it is going to have to be another game where the defense shows how improved it is, but I think they can get it done. I think the home opener in Lambeau, Green Bay, and it matters at this point, I think, the extra time to prepare, the benefit of playing on a Thursday, being able to watch Minnesota, having a little extra rested bodies, even though it's only Week 2. For all those reasons, I really like the Packers in this game. And what is, if the Vikings, on the flip side, start the season whooping Atlanta and then going to Green Bay and winning, then you start saying, oh, was last year the aberration in Minnesota? And is this the team that we saw in 2017, but with a quarterback improvement with Cousins over Keenum?
I know you said Aaron Rodgers didn't play in the preseason. He's just getting used to Matt LaFleur's offense. That whole offense is getting used to life under LaFleur. Nick's really high on the Packers. Did what you see in week 1 concern you at all about them generating some offense, or is it just going to be him getting the reps under Matt LaFleur?
No, I think it's just Aaron Rodgers getting the reps under LaFleur. I think the offense will figure it out. I think David Bakhtiari is a big piece of what they do because you're going to have to protect Aaron Rodgers, especially now that Matt LaFleur is implementing more play action and Aaron Rodgers having to turn his back to the defense before he snaps it back on his receivers downfield. So you got to make sure that the protection is shored up, and that's one area that Minnesota, can make sure that the Packers offense has their handful because they have so many guys that can get after the quarterback. But in looking at this game, I'm more concerned with the other quarterback and what happens with Kirk Cousins because this Packers defense is a lot better than what they saw in the Atlanta Falcons defense in week 1. Kirk Cousins is going to have to throw more than 10 passes in this game.
10.
So, I mean, what happens? What kind of Kirk Cousins are we going to get? What version of that guy are we going to see on Sunday? That's the biggest question going into this game because you got to be thinking, if you're Matt LaFleur, if you're Mike Pettin, the defensive coordinator for the Packers, I don't want to allow that Minnesota Vikings offense to ring up almost 200 yards rushing. I want to try to put this game on Kirk Cousins and then see if he can beat it.
Absolutely, because the Vikings' plan is going to be to run the ball with Dalvin Cook as often as possible. You want to make them hit their second pitch. Critical player for Green Bay in this game, your guy Kenny Clark.
Yes.
The nose tackle for the Green Bay Packers to stop the run, force them into passing situations where Preston Zadarius Smith can rush the passer, where Jair Alexander, their great corner, can get out and do some things. Force the Vikings past the ball. That's what the Packers are going to try to do.